Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Dodgeball, a true underdog story. The real underdog part of this movie is the fact that this movie took frickin' 12 years to put together, to make, to put it all out there. Like, as if somebody probably had, like, this pitch for the longest time, and they were like, hey man, can we finally make this movie? And they're like, it's a sports film. But here's the thing about this also, is we kind of have a movie where we don't have a lot of time to marinate with a lot of things, but we also have this movie that is to give us a bunch of things that we probably no longer justifyingly do anymore. We rarely do much of like sports movies unless there's like a really like intriguing uh like sports story where it has like this like unique like rags to riches kind of thing. But here's the goofy thing about this film. So we have to where Peter LaFleur is the average Joe's gym owner who is to somehow or another be $50,000 in debt, and it seems like he has all the time in the world to be able to eventually pay off that debt. But so we have Peter LaFleur that is to have $50,000 in debt and is to find out miraculously at that same exact time that there's a tournament slash competition that's going on that is to deal with Dodgeball that is to be paying out $50,000 because ESPN 8 is putting together this Dodgeball tournament that is going to pay out this amount of money. In my brain, I would go on and say, like, well, you know what? I've seen a number of substantial networks go on and do some crazy competition sports reward shows, and eventually those rewards like come out to be like just, hey guys, you're gonna get $10,000 at the end of this show. And I'm just like, wait a minute. Like, so Dodgeball is paying $50,000, which you would think would probably be actually $10,000 by the end of this whole tournament. But yeah, so I would not see a Dodgeball thing being paid $50,000. That just seems unreasonable. It doesn't matter if it's via ESPN or not. It just like it doesn't seem realistic. But other than that, we have White Goodman. White Goodman has got to be straight up like the worst villain ever. Just like I just don't like him. Like you can go on and like say that there are villains you don't like because maybe they're scary or maybe they're, like I don't like White Goodman just because he's like just like he rubs me the wrong way, and that should always be what a villain should be in a movie. But still, like we have at some points where we not only have this character who is just kind of stupid, but then on top of that, we have him go on and have certain lines like, you only go to the gym because you hate yourself, and like I'm like, wow, like I don't like that line whatsoever. Um but like so but not only that, we have White Goodman who's supposed to give a crap about a gym that's not even his competitor because White Goodman is like a millionaire who is to have this successful global gym that is to just want to go on and have Average Joe's Gym just become some parking garage for him, for his members, and he's taking his personal interest in Average Joe's Gym to see if they are to go on and somehow succeed in trying to get this money together to get out of this problem that they're in. And so White Goodman is taking a personal interest a in characters that he honestly should not give a rip about. But again, it's kind of one of those like, well, for every hero you have to have a villain, and a lot about this movie is to go on and just feel like a Karate Kid kind of film, uh, where you just gotta go on and have like the the nice hero guy that like doesn't really have much about him. Like he's a very bland like character. And then we go on and we have like the Ben Stiller character that is to be this bully character that is to just consistently put down Peter constantly and so on and so forth. So anyways, just a lot of cliche and just a lot of just a lot of bland, unmarinated movie that is to eventually just be okay at the end of the day. Even though there's some funny here, there's some basic funny, there's some very bland funny, but still, uh, the stupid Patches O'Houlihan. I like to drink my own urine because it's stale and I like the taste. We have to have like some coach that is to go on and give Peter this towel as if it's some like an amazing thing that he just tossed to him. And also we just have this guy who is to go on and try to coach these guys, but like really when looking at it, like I don't feel that Patches O'Houlihan doesn't really coach like much, and Peter isn't really a leader much either. The only reason why Peter is probably a leader within this team is probably because he's taller than everyone else. Probably that's the only reason why he's a leader in this movie. So yeah, there's so much about this movie that's just there's not enough there. So Dodgeball would probably actually like this movie would actually make sense if it was a show, not a film. If you would have made a show out of it, I think people and you could kind of build to a lot of things. I think this movie, or I think whatever this would have probably paid out a little bit better. But anyways, so with that said, I think it's about time to just go into spoilers. This is just an okay, at the end of the day film. A light okay, but still okay. So let's double fine this bad boy up. Let's get spoilers out of here because it's about that time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time to spoil this movie. So we have Peter who is waking up for his day, going on and brushing his teeth with Yoo-hoo. And I think he ends up swallowing the Yoo-hoo with the toothpaste, which is gross. But not only that, when Peter is to eventually turn on the television and have White Goodman, who is to have Globo Gym and is to do this whole commercial about him going on and talking about how, like, people who are to probably go to the gym are to probably hate themselves, which, again, I don't like, or if I haven't said this before, that whole thing was just like, wow, that's a harsh way of approaching this. So White Goodman is to go on and be a character who's to eventually like be on this huge, massive TV screen to then motivate people randomly by saying like, "Hey, Steve, do you call that a sit-up? Hey, Jan, do you like good form?" And this and that, just kind of weirdly just chiming in whenever randomly like. But I guess like for a gym coach, like you go on and you just have a number of times where people are motivating you, but it just sounds goofy. So because they're always usually saying like very generic things like, "Come on, one more set, one more time, come on, like you can do this." It's kind of like the gym are kind of like those like gym on tape kind of things, like the Taibos and the whatevers that are to go on and give you all these sessions, but then like they don't make it very personal. They kind of go on and just be like, well, like very generic motivational things to just kind of get you to keep going on and doing what you're doing, like sweating with oldies and all those kinds of stuff. Anyways, pushing on. So White Goodman goes on and is eventually talking about plastic surgeries and is to also mention that he used to be this 300-pound man and is to have transformed himself into what you see today, yada, yada, yada. So Peter is to go on and see this whole commercial about Globo Gym, and then he is to go on to make it to his gym, which is Average Joe's Gym, which he is to hope that his car is to hold up for him to be able to make it to his gym, which it doesn't, and so he ends up getting pushed his way to his gym. And so Peter goes into the gym and is to immediately bump into Gordon, who I guess is to be reading all these sports magazines. And so Gordon is mentioning that he's going to work on his glutes and a number of other things. So we. Excuse me. We then go on and have Peter, who's bumping into Justin, who is to be some kind of weird Chinese, like, uh, like puzzle of sorts, and Justin, it seems, is going through a rough time because he is to need to bulk up to become a cheerleader, because cheerleaders, I guess, have to go on and at some points have to go on and lift up women and do stuff like that. Of course, if you were to go on and watch any cheerleading movie for some whatever reason, you would go on and see that like there's lifting involved, there's having to like put people over your head, and so there's challenges to that. So we go on and we have Justin, who has been wanting all of his life to be closer to Amber, who is actually with Derek. So Justin is to go on and try out for the cheerleading squad, and it seems that he ends up getting a girl that's bigger than all the others. Really, I don't even like saying that, but like it's just I have to go on and make that comparison, and I apologize if anybody's offended by me going on and just saying like that girl is to have been bigger than all the others. It is what it is with this film. So Justin is to go on and try to pick up this girl, but then eventually the girl ends up falling right on top of Justin. And so, as this girl is to eventually be kind of picked up, Justin is to kind of gotten possibly the wind knocked out of him or something like that, to eventually have him be a cheerleader that they justified to not have him on this team. So Peter is to go on and say like, well, hey, like go on and just start slow. Like don't overwork yourself, cuz like you're not going to get anywhere. Like if anything, you're just going to get hurt by going on and like pushing yourself too hard. Plus a lot of times when you go on, you have to like lift weights. It's a slow process. Like going on and making like a substantial gain as far as eventually like lifting eventually hundreds of pounds, that takes years to accomplish unless you are to go on and like steroid up or whatever, and then that's different, which I wouldn't recommend because it's a very unhealthy way to eventually go on and probably die. You can go on and there is like supplements and stuff like that that can go on and help you. I know there is sometimes where I had to go on and take supplements just because like, and this is coming from a person that at some point in his life, not currently, but used to work out like every single day. And like getting gains was very hard. Even working out every single day. Um, so yeah, like go and figure out like what kind of supplements and things that are available that you can go on and transform your body. At some point, it'll take a while, but eventually you'll see results after years and years, and also having to probably go on and do a job that's very strenuous. Also, like uh, like moving furniture, just like working a moving furniture job. That's going to take a lot out of your freaking life. But anyways, pushing on. So we go on and we have it to where Peter is to bump into Steve the pirate, who is to mention that he's going to be behind this month on his payment unless he can go on and find his buried treasure. And Peter's like, no, that's fine. Like, you can go on and just a couple bucks here and there. Like, that's all I ever ask. So Peter is to then go finally into his office where he's to meet up with Kate, who is to let Peter know that Peter is to be kind of behind on things and that she's going to go and try to audit Peter and see if there's any kind of certain kind of paperwork that she can go and assess and analyze and go and see if she can kind of write stuff down for Peter. And it seems that Peter is to go on and have a closet full of all these little pieces of paper that are eventually going to add up to where Kate is going to have to go on and figure how far in debt Peter really is. So, because with that said, also, Peter being $50,000 in debt, and White Goodman was to go on and send Kate to this business to try to eventually get rid of him. Eventually has like Peter go on and ask Kate, it's like, well, hey, who was the person who was to go on and try and send you here? So Peter is to go on and meet with White Goodman and like ask like, well, hey, like what's like why are you going on and hassling me? White Goodman is to go on and mention about the times which uh that Peter had pulled pranks on White Goodman, and he didn't like that. So that's the reason why White Goodman is to go on and pull this on him, because White Goodman is to go on and need this parking garage for his members, and so that's all he really cares about. And he doesn't really care that any number of these guys are eventually going to go on and lose their jobs or eventually lose their gym that they've grown attached to at some point. So Peter and Vaughn or Peter and White are kind of just talking it out. And so eventually that just leads to Peter then having to break the news to his guys that he is going to lose this gym. There's nothing that they can go on and do. But we start to have the guys who are to immediately think, well, hey, like I don't want to go on and go to some other gym. I love it here. And so they all decide it's like, well, what can we do to possibly make money? And so at first they all decide to do a car wash, which eventually just turns out to have Justin, who's only having to clean a one car with this guy who's to consistently pick at his belly button and have Justin clean his car. All while we go on and have, like, right next door when they try to do this car wash, there's a bunch of girls who are all trying to do this car wash at the exact same time. So we really just have Peter at this point who's just going on and saying like, hey guys, like since this whole car wash thing didn't work, if anything, we're kind of down money now. How about we just go on and we just like put the thong song on, like the Cisco thong song on, and we just tear apart this whole gym and just kind of figure out a way to just kind of make the best out of what we can. all of a sudden Gordon is to realize that he was reading this magazine, which is to have this dodgeball competition that is to pay out $50,000. And again, I mind you, like, this is to just break even, really. For them to pay off this $50,000 is just to really break even. But again, by the way the payout of this movie is to be by the end of this film, like, it's to be way more substantial than $50,000, but it is what it is. So, anyways, so Gordon is to have this magazine with this payout, and so it seems that Gordon is to easily be able to figure out how they can qualify for this tournament. So Gordon is to set everything up, and we have it to where Peter is to go on and say, it's like, well, hey guys, I had you at blood and semen, so like, let's go on and let's do this dodgeball tournament. So here's the thing though, like, these guys barely really know how to play dodgeball, and so Justin is to luckily have a tape from his gym class to be able to help them figure out how to go on and play dodgeball. So we go on and we have Patches O'Houlihan that is to go on and tell you the 5 Ds: dive, duck, dodge, dip, and dodge. So we go on and we have Patches O'Houlihan that is to mention to this little kid within this video that this kid, when picking a certain team, should kind of pick the bigger kids, and like, because this is kind of like a certain kind of sport where there's some like certain like shame involved and certain kind of things. So anyways, we go on, and so Patches O'Houlihan is to show like the basics of dodgeball, and so we have this qualifier that is to be like the next day, and so Vince Vaughn and everybody, or Peter LaFleur and everybody, are just saying like, well, we can just kind of figure out what we're gonna do tomorrow and hope for the best. So, because like they're not gonna really practice this or kind of figure out any kind of strategy, they're just gonna go on and do this and hope for the best. Hopefully they win. So they go to this qualifier and come to find out that they're going up against this troop. And they think, oh, it's just gonna be some Boy Scouts or some military guys, and instead it ends up being a bunch of Girl Scouts. And so we go on and have the average Joes going up against these Girl Scouts, and we end up having it to where, of course, every single one of these guys end up getting taken out besides Peter LaFleur, and then eventually, like, the average Joes lose. So come to find out, we have one of the people who are going to hand out this qualifying thing. We have a guy named Mr. Ralph, who's played by Curtis Armstrong. Will probably a cluster of people will probably know him as Booger from Revenge of the Nerds, Curtis Armstrong. We have Mr. Ralph that is going on and eventually going to announce the winner of this qualifier, but the thing of it is that come to find out, one of the Girl Scouts was to be like randomly drug screened to be able to do this, and they ended up finding steroids and a number of other things like tranquilizers and all kinds of stuff in this person's system. And so the Girl Scouts ended up getting disqualified, which really just means that the average Joes were to win this tournament by default. So really it's kind of like a win, but it's like a ha, yay, yeah, we still lost, kind of. So we go on, and so Patches O'Houlihan was to have seen this whole qualifying match, and he was just kind of so disappointed by these guys. So we have it to where Peter is kind of going and celebrating with the rest of the guys, going to this one restaurant. And so all of a sudden we turn around and we have a Globo Gym that is to also show up at this gym, or at this place, this restaurant that they're at. So because Peter LaFleur and all the guys were at this restaurant eating, celebrating, and so Globo Gym is going to make their way there. So White Goodman is to go on and present every single character that's going to be involved in his team, which is to be a girl named Fran, who I guess where she was to have gone on and been from, like her country is to like benefit off of like Dodgeball. And so we turn around and we of course have it to where White Goodman is to go on and mention his team of Blade and Laser and Blazer and Michelle and then Fran, and so, and then White Goodman. So we go on, and we have, of course, where White Goodman is to go on and knock over this waitress with all this food and drinks and everything like that. And basically just going on as per usual to have White Goodman telling Peter that he's going to wipe the floor with him and beat him at this competition. And Gordon is going on and saying like, well, hey, how did you guys go on and win any kind of qualifier? And White Goodman is to go on and mention that it's like, well, hey, like, I was to go on and help the chairman of this this whole dodgeball thing lose a couple of pounds for beach season, and so he kind of let me in as a buy. Let me pause here for a second. All right. So now we go on and we have a number of things to go on and kind of set up here. So we of course have White Goodman that is to go on and meet with Kate, as it seems that eventually when Kate is to go on and first meet with White Goodman, he is to have a whole painting about him grabbing life by the horns, metaphorically, and he is to be kind of walking down the stairs with this dictionary, and he's like, oh yeah, I put together a mental sweat also. So we have it to where Kate is to meet with White Goodman, and at like right after he is to pump up his Johnson, because pump up the jam. So we have Kate that is to go on and really have no interest in being anywhere near White Goodman besides being employed by him, because he is to go on and say, it's like, well, like, you work with the bank work with me, so ipso facto, I'm your boss. And so, like, kind of do whatever he says. So White is to go on, or Goodman is to go on and tell Kate that we should mate or we should date. and Kate has zero interest in that. So Kate eventually is to go on at some point or another just loathe Goodman to the point of once we have Patches O'Houlihan that is to meet with Peter LaFleur's team after they were to have gone on and gotten the floor mopped by them by having a bunch of food and drinks be all tossed all over them, and they are to be coming out of this restaurant to meet up with Patches O'Houlihan, because we of course have it to where Dwight is mentioning like, man, this other team has like phasers and tasers and lasers and all kinds of other asers, and so what are we gonna do? And all of a sudden they are to come up with finding Patches O'Houlihan that is to really just go on and find them. So we have, of course, where Patches is to then go on and is to do the whole, like, you can dodge a wrench, you can dodge a ball, you can dodge traffic, you can dodge a ball. And so we have at points where Justin is just to get pelted with all of this stuff, these wrenches, and he's to get freaking pelted with balls. We have Gordon who's to get hit with these cars, and it's hilarious. So we have it where like Patches is to see all these like weird phrases like you're as useful as a poopy flavored lollipop and all of this stuff. So we have Patches who's going on and trying to mentor these people, but the only person he actually really mentors is probably Gordon, and telling him that he needs to get angry, and Gordon is not that kind of person. He's always very nice, and so Patches ends up hitting Gordon in the junk, and he falls to the ground. He's like, eh! And so he falls over. And we just have it to where, like, Gordon doesn't really get angry until it's, like, finally, like, the perfect time for him to use this anger to finally, like, benefit his team. So, because he's, like, the last resort character. So yeah, so we have it to where, like, Patches is kind of putting up White as this kind of little cardboard cutout that keeps going back and forth. And so it seems like Patches is trying to find like a really good thrower within the midst of this team. And come to find out, it seems that one of the balls ends up getting away from them. And so Kate is to pick it up, and she is to toss this ball. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, wait a minute. It seems like we got something here. It seems like Kate is to be this like really good softball player, and like she might be a really good addition to this team. And so Peter has to go on and convince Kate to go on this team with them to win this reward at the end of this whole tournament. So we have Michelle that is watching this video feed and is to go on and tell White Goodman, who is bizarrely putting pizza down his pants, as well as also he is torturing himself with some donut before, electrifying himself if he is to be tempted to go on and eat this donut. So we have it where Michelle is telling White Goodman that it seems like these guys are somehow getting better. And so White Goodman is like, well, yeah, of course they are. So White Goodman is to go on and eventually need to figure out a way to woo Kate after he is to go on and wash off the pizza from his body, I guess. So pizza body wash, I guess. Anyways, so White Goodman is to put on his white shoes and is to go and win over Kate, supposedly. So Goodman is to go on and meet with Kate at her place and is to tell her that Goodman had gotten Kate fired because he had mentioned that she was drunk on the job and that she had possibly stole a couple things. And so Kate is like, "Oh my god, why did you do that to me? Like, you might have cost me my job." And so since Kate is no longer working on that case, we have it to where Goodman is to be able to now try and woo her, which that is not at all going to work. So we have it to where Goodman is to kind of put the moves on Kate, and she is not interested, to the point of Goodman consistently pressing Kate, and Kate is to go on and then slam this guy against this wall, hoping that eventually he'll get the message to bleed his own blood. So Peter all of a sudden is to bizarrely arrive at Kate's place because story, and so Goodman is to go on and like, nobody makes me bleed my own blood, nobody, and then he leaves with Michelle on this motorcycle. So Peter, I guess, because being possibly Goodman's kind of deterrent, and Kate just going on and eventually just like, well, hey, like, you can be the guy that protects me if he comes back. How about you come into my place and see that I have a ton of unicorn crap all over the place. If you're a person that loves unicorns, then, like, good for you. Like, I know I have a bunch of just, like, collectible stuff also, so what am I to say? But still. So we go on, we have Peter LaFleur here that's going on like, oh, Barbara, and all this stuff. So Kate is to be a big fan of unicorns for some reason, to where she has everything all over this house as unicorns. I guess if these two were ever to really tie the knot, not quite sure if there's ever going to be a bunch of unicorns all over this place. But anyways, so we have it to where Peter is convincing Kate to go on and do this whole dodgeball thing with his team, and Kate is to finally go on and be like, you know what, like, I think I'll go on and do it. Like, I just want to see the face of White Goodman when he ends up getting defeated at the end of all this. So Kate is going to be an active part of this roster because she's going to be really good. So we go on and have the average Joes go on and do this ESPN tournament. So we go on and we are to course have like this ESPN dodgeball tournament that is to have these kind of very scantily clad looking cheerleaders, which they kind of much more come off as like the WCW Nitro girls, much more so than cheerleaders. To where I'm like, man, these girls are wearing some really skimpy outfits. But really, when thinking about it, I'm like, well, like, probably wouldn't like normal cheerleaders within the NFL, wouldn't they be wearing just as skimpy of outfits? I would probably have to say yes. So, speaking of which, we actually have like a WWE wrestler, Candice Michelle, who, if you were to have gone on and probably watched Candice Michelle, just simply with her entrance, you'd go on of like, yeah, she's pretty much to be set up as like this kind of X-rated wrestler. So, and she ends up being one of the dancers within this movie, which I thought was kind of interesting. So, anyways, we have this tournament start out, and so we have of course, where supposedly Kate was to have her own changing room, which she doesn't actually get. So, come to find out, we have it to where Owen is to want to go on and get these guys some more substantial jerseys for them to wear for this tournament. And so he ends up opening this box and he realizes that there's a bunch of S&M leather and lace outfits. And so he's like, hey, this isn't what I ordered. And so come to find out, we have the team that are thinking like, oh, we have all the time in the world to find our accurate clothes and whatever. And come to find out, Patches is to say, hey guys, like, we're up already. Come on, let's go. So we have a number of cluster of just teams that eventually I will at some point mention here for these guys to have gone on and probably beat all these guys. Like, we had the Kamikazes, we have the Germans, we have a number of just goofy teams that are kind of displayed throughout here who have specific kind of themes to them for whatever reason. So we have the average Joes that are forced to be wearing these S&M costumes, and then the S&M dodgeball team are eventually wearing the average Joe's costumes, and they're going to swap it out. So we go on and we have it to where the average Joes are going up against the Germans. And so we also had a moment where Gordon was supposed to get angry at some point. So eventually he finally does. And when Gordon ends up getting angry, he ends up becoming a much better player. So, but like, that doesn't happen right now. It happens somewhere later down the road. But I just wanted to say that now. So, anyways, we go on and have the average Joes go up against the Germans in their S&M gear. And so we have like both the announcers who are both Cotton McKnight and Pepper Brooks going on and having these kind of wisecracking like things going on, and having like Pepper mention that like this feels like some kind of share concert or something like that, or a share video talking about the S&M guys. So come to find out, average Joe's is to kind of really take down easily the Germans, and so we have Hasselhoff that is to, I guess, be the coach of the Germans, and he's to be very upset with them. And so, because of course the Germans are to kind of idolize David Hasselhoff, and they're kind of putting their fingers on the whole like picture of him and stuff like that. I thought that was really fun. I like, we have some kind of like interesting like, because David Hasselhoff was to go on and eventually do music, and eventually I guess the only like place that really loved David Hasselhoff's music was Germany, I guess, and like that's the whole thing. Plus, like, David Hasselhoff technically being involved with the whole like Berlin Wall thing, and like there's just a lot of like connections with David Hasselhoff and just in Germany, and connections with stuff as far as overseas goes, because I'm of course in North America. So we go on into this story, and so we have to kind of showcase more of the average Joes than any of the global gym stuff, because a lot of that stuff, like, you just kind of see them quickly beating people or quickly taking down people, or there's the whole like funny goofy peekaboo thing where he ends up going on and taking certain guys down, and so on and so forth. So we have, of course, were the next kind of guys to kind of take down for the average Joes are, of course, to be uh, like the lumberjacks. Like those were kind of goofy but fun, uh, like characters to be like put together with. We had the skills that kill, where those guys weren't even try to win the game. They're just goofily dancing that whole time, and like they ended up getting easily taken out. So we have it to where like the cobras, or the vipers, the global gym, they were to go on and go up against the kamikaze characters, the guys that were like slapping their chests before this whole thing started. And after they were to go on and have like the average Joes get their jerseys, they're saying like, "Hey man, maybe we should go on and start slapping ourselves in the chest." So we have it to where the Globo Gym guys would easily take out the kamikazes because they're going to be making it into the finals anyways. So we go on and we have the average Joes that are continuing to kind of clean house, going on and eventually making it to the more important teams, like the flying cobras, or the flying cougars. And here's where we go on and we have Gordon, who is to eventually be a valued character within this team, because it comes down to Gordon being the only one left. And so he has to go on and he has to get angry, and that's when he goes, ah, and he starts to like Hulk out, and he starts pelting people with freaking balls and starts nailing them. And then we go on and we have Gordon, who is to kind of go up and beat this team easily. So we go on and we have it where like eventually uh average shows and global gym keep getting eventual success within this tournament. And so at one point we have it to where Justin is to meet up with Amber, and she's doing some cheer competition with Derek. And so we have it to where Justin and Amber have this moment where Justin is to mention that Amber looks really healthy. And Justin is to kind of reflect on Derek's sweet do, uh, as Derek is just to call like Justin like having him have helmet hair. So we go on and Amber and Derek make their way to this ride. And so we have Dwight, who's telling Justin, it's like, well, I hope that kid goes on to that ride and breaks every bone in his body. And so we then have it to where Derek is to do that exact same thing. And so we desperately have Amber that is to need Justin to help like the cheerleading team with this competition. And it seems that Justin is to be the only one that is to, of course, go to her school, but then on top of that, know all of the routines, because he, of course, had tried out several times for the cheerleading squad. So Justin is to go on and do this competition with Amber, and they are to eventually win this competition. And Justin eventually needs to run off to eventually go on and do his dodgeball tournament. And Amber's like, well, hey, aren't you going to wait for the trophy? And Justin's like, no, I got to go on and get my own trophy. So, because, yeah, like, we have this whole thing kind of tying up to, like, this being closer and closer to the end of this film. So, now I'm trying to backpedal to think if there's any, like, thing really left that I should go on and do and talk about and whichever. So, we have it, of course, where after the first whole S&M kind of matchup, we have it since the Average Joes were to win their first match. We have Patches, who is to go on and say that Peter is a good leader and that he's giving him his towel to go on and have as a memento for him being a good leader. And so we've had it to where Peter is to be trained differently than everyone else, and he's going to have to go on and do everything blindfolded. So that eventually is going to be a foreshadowing thing for the end of this film. So we go on and have these guys that are being so successful because of Patches O'Houlihan's guidance that they're thinking like, hey, there's no way that we can't go on and not win this because we have Patches' help. So all of a sudden we have it to where Cotton McKnight is to mention that it seems that the Average Joes are getting like the luck of the Irish. And so all of a sudden we have the Average Joes that are going through this casino and thinking that they're going to win because they have Patches as their coach. And all of a sudden we have it to where Patches O'Houlihan is to be crushed by this sign that says luck of the Irish. So we now have the Average Joe's guys, or the Average Joe's team, that is to go on and realize, like, oh my god, like, we had just lost, like, our ace in the hole, and now what are we gonna do? So we have it to where, like, Peter is to really just start to feel like he just needs to figure out a way out of here. And so Peter is to go on and meet with Goodman and carve up an offer that's going to benefit him. So Peter is to go on and sign away his gym to Goodman, and Goodman is to go and pay Peter $100,000, which is to be twice what he would have gone if he would have won this tournament. So we then have it where, like, Goodman is to make the joke about how, like, $100,000 gets lost in the translation between, like, briefcases full of money and all this kinds of stuff. So we have Peter that is to take this money and then is to not want to show up for the finale of this whole thing, to just have the Average Joe's forfeit and Peter go off and possibly be haunted by this decision for the rest of his life, as we have Lance Armstrong that is to appear next to Peter while he's at this bar, telling him it's like, well, hey, like, I had like cancer in the brain, the lungs, and everywhere else, and I was to go on and win all of my Tour de France's, which eventually we later on and go and find out that there might have been a whole entire reason for Lance Armstrong winning all of the races that he eventually had gone on and done. Because eventually, like, yeah, like, we find out, like, at some points how Lance had a possible competitive edge that they didn't go on and realize. So Peter was to eventually decide to put money on his team because there's 50 to 1 odds that the Average Joes are going to beat the Global Gym guys. So Peter goes in to this dodgeball tournament to go up against Global Gym, and because we have it to where the Chancellor, the Dodgeball Chancellor is eventually looking at the Average Joe's team and saying like, hey guys, you don't have enough people, you're going to have to forfeit. And so the Chancellor is to go on and reward the Global Gym people by default that, hey guys, like, you guys are going to win this. And all of a sudden we have Peter LaFleur shows up that is going to be the even number of people for them to go on and do this team, because Peter had gone on and eventually tried to convince Steve the Pirate that he's not a pirate anymore. And so we have it to where Steve is to finally like take down his bandana and is to go on and really look at himself, and he ends up getting pelted with some kind of drink of sorts. And so Steve eventually, by the end of this movie, is to come to some realization that he's not a pirate anymore. But then he swerves back into being Steve the Pirate when eventually Peter is like, well, hey, who am I gonna like share all this buried treasure with? So, and then Steve goes back to being Steve the Pirate. So anyways, Peter is to make it back within the team, and so all all the rest of the Average Joe guys like Owen, Dwight, and Kate were to kind of wait for all their other members. And so like, well, hey, like how come like I think we can just kind of go on and play with 4 people, or I think we can go on and do this, or we can do that. And but Dwight is saying, it's like, well, hey, where's Justin? And where's like the pirate? And Owen's like, wait a minute, we have a pirate on our team? And Dwight's like, yeah, the pirate guy. How do you not know we have a have a pirate guy? Like, duh. So Owen is like, no, I don't understand that we have a pirate guy. And then eventually by the end of the movie, Owen is to realize, hey, yeah, that was Steve the Pirate. And Dwight's like, really? You just now realize that? So yeah, so we have it where Peter is to be there. There seems to be a voting system that goes on to overthrow William Shatner's character, who's the Chancellor. And so we have a number of people that are thumbing up or thumbing down, and Goodman is to eventually have his own commentary of how this is going. So first guy thumbs up, and Goodman's like, no, no, no. And the second woman is like thumbs down. He's like, yes, finally. And then the last person is to be, of course, Chuck Norris, which I'm kind of thinking that White Goodman's look is to have probably been somehow or another based off of Chuck Norris. And maybe that's the reason why they had him here. I don't know. Maybe it's just this kind of weird kind of thing of just like having Chuck Norris there randomly as this judge. So Chuck Norris is to go on and give the thumbs up, and we of course have the line at some point in this movie where White Goodman is a freaking Chuck Norris, and I thought that was hilarious. So we go on, and so we now have Global Gym against the Average Joes. So this is the finale. I hope that I've covered kind of everything about this movie so far. Holy I've almost talked for an hour about this movie. It's an hour and a half. There's so much to talk about in this film. Good God. And I probably didn't even go over much of the lines of the goofy crap that ends up going through this film because rush, rush, rush. So we also had it to where Gordon and Dwight, while in the casino, were talking about a double vault, which eventually was going to be like the sudden death double vault thing that was going to be for the end of this film. So we go on, and what ends up happening between Average Joe's and Global Gym, it seems that we go on and have Justin being the last guy left for Average Joe's. And we have to where Justin is kind of crazily dodging all these balls, and then eventually he starts ending up catching some, and then Kate ends up actually catching one, and then Peter, Kate, and Justin are all like back on the average Joes, and then it's kind of like an even matchup. So eventually, what ends up happening is Amber is all of a sudden telling Justin that he loves her, and Justin ends up getting caught up by that he ends up getting pelted with this ball. We also had it at some point between Globo Jim and Average Joe's where Owen and Fran kind of go on and basically eliminate one another out by them wanting to be tempted to throw a ball at one another, but then they decide like, oh, I don't think we can do this. Plus, Owen and Fran were to have gone on to this bar, and Fran was to ask Owen, it's like, well, hey, like, you're the guy that looks at me. Like, why are you looking at me? And Owen's like, well, I think that you're the most beautiful woman in the world. And so Fran just likes that, and she's like, oh, okay, all right. So there's something unique about this guy. So they kind of eliminate one another off. So, but anyways, back towards the end of this film, trying to quickly get this over with. We have it to where it comes down to both Peter and Goodman, because we of course have it to where Kate ends up getting eliminated, and Goodman like goes the extra mile and tosses this ball at Kate, and the referee is saying that Goodman is to get a warning, and Goodman's like, well, hey, it slipped out of my hands, like it was just like we're sweating here, like it is what it is. So Kate ends up getting hit with this ball, and Kate is telling Peter it's like get him kind of thing. So we go on and we have Goodman, who is to seem to eliminate Peter, but Goodman ends up accidentally stepping over the line, so it's a double vault. So they have to go into sudden death with these weird, like skull and bones balls and stuff like that. So Peter goes on, and he, of course, is to wear this towel that Patches O'Houlihan was to give him, and wear it over his eyes. And so we have Goodman, who is to grab his ball and is going to set up for Peter getting taken out here. But then Peter is to figure out how to dodge this ball at the perfect time to then go and grab his ball and eliminate Goodman by pelting him in the face. And so the average Joes end up winning, and they end up winning, of course, $50,000. But then on top of that, we have it to where Peter was to go on and take $100,000 and invest it in the 50-1 odds of his team winning. So eventually what ended up happening was that at the end of all this, they had gotten $5 million from every bit of everything. So Peter's going to go and turn around and basically buy Globo Gym and fire Goodman, and then go on and just kind of eventually just like create a much more substantial Average Joe's gym, and eventually just have this kind of commercial of his business and stuff like that. The kind of like, hey guys, like if you feel good, but if you want to go and turn around and lose some pounds, like come to Average Joe's. So, but anyways, we also had the moment where Kate was to meet up with her woman who is to be Joyce, and they end up kissing. And so we have it to where there were some kind of theories of whether or not Kate was to be like, what team was she batting on, and come to find out, Kate was to break it down to of course, Peter that she is batting for both teams because she is bi. So eventually she kisses both Joyce, but then she goes on and kisses Peter, saying that eventually she's going to end up with both these people, and that's how things are just going to like end up. So, and then this kind of leads us to eventually Peter giving us the whole tour of this new gym and how it's set up and whatever. So yeah, like that's how it all breaks down to be. It seems that Amber at some point at the end of this movie was pregnant with some kid, maybe Justin's, who knows, maybe someone else, maybe it was Derek and his broken boned child, I don't know. But at the end of the day, that's all that I want to say about this movie. A whole lot of stuff that I went on and had to go on and mention and whatever. We also had it to where at the end of this film we had White Goodman, who is to turn back to his much more heavier set self and is to be upset that Chuck Norris was to have cost him this win, and that also he is to go on and just be eating this chicken. And so we also had the weird end credit scene at the very end of this movie where we had uh, Goodman, who is to go on and uh, play with his body and then just call it a day. And so yeah, like very very odd film at the end of all this. But anyways, with that said, I think I'm gonna get out of here so I can go on and put this out for the day, and plus also go to sleep, because if you went on and saw me yawning and pausing and whatever, I apologize. But justifyingly, uh this is kind of way later than normally I would, because I couldn't figure out what exactly to review. There's some days where there's like clear consensus of like, oh yeah, I should definitely do this and I should go on and do this. But there's also just kind of like random flip of coin days where I'm just like, sure, I'll do this, like, or I just need some time to figure out what my other thing for to review for that day really is. And so Dodgeball just seemed to be one of those where I'm like, okay, this could be a fun movie. Let's go on and kind of figure this all out. So with that said, I'm gonna get out of here. Bye bye. Bye everybody.